Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar, and we are back with another fan commentary. If you're watching these in chronological order by date I recorded them, been a while. Sorry about that. I've been meaning to do more of these, and I got tied up. But what better way to start off a month of several of these than with a Mel Brooks classic, Young Frankenstein? Now, this was a film I was introduced to. Dang, it's hard to remember the exact date, but would have been the late 90s, early 2000s. Went to my grandmother's house, flipping through the movie channels whenever she would get one of the preview ones, because the only one she kept was the Encore ones because it came standard with the package she had. We were flipping through them, and this movie was on, and we watched it. Now, at this point, I was already starting to get into some of the Universal horror films, Frankenstein, Wolfman. Not so much Dracula, which, as you could tell from my view on that film, other than saying Lugosi gave an excellent performance, my view on that film still the same. Now, without realizing this was a Fox film, not Universal, I thought it was just another one fit in the same time period or one that was made in tribute to him. It wasn't until years later that I started to realize, oh yeah, this is a full-on spoof. Because I knew this film was funny, but I didn't realize that's the type of humor it is. It's satire. Like, I don't know some people will consider it cinematic sacrilege to make this comparison, but it is like Scary Movie 3. They're both spoofing films. Say this film is miles above Scary Movie 3. Is that one, even though I like it, example of a series doing parody going on the downward trend. With this film, it has a lot of that satire humor, but it's played in a way to where it doesn't get too meta to where it pulls you out of the film. Not only in comparison to other spoof films, but compared to other spoof films that Mel Brooks himself has done. Even the one he did right before this, Blazing Saddles. That one, there's a lot of fourth wall breaks, especially in the latter half of the movie. Most of the early one is in dialogue. What in the wild world of sports is going on here? And now my next impression, Jesse Owens. Stuff like that. But then it's Spaceballs, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, and stuff like that is where we get the real deep fourth wall breaks. We also get one, of course, in History of the World Part 1. It's a miracle! But this one, not so much. It has Mel's, stamp of the spoof thing. It's his most restrained when it comes to that. And part of that is that he wrote this in conjunction with Gene Wilder. Now, Gene Wilder seemed to have had this nugget of an idea of like, what would happen if I were the great-grandson of the famous Victor Frankenstein? He got to writing. Mel Brooks contacted him about replacing another actor on Blazing Saddles, because for those of you who don't know, Gene Wilder, who played the kid shooter in that one, he was not the first choice. They actually had another actor in the role at one point, but then they had to push him out for one reason. I don't have it on hand, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. He approached Gene Wilder, and Gene was like, "Hey, do you want to do this film with me, Gene?" And he tells Mel, "I'll do it, but right afterwards, you need to help me with this one project I want. I want that to be your next movie." And the rest is cinematic history, as it were. Now, because of how the humor in this film works, I know, I'm getting a little sidetracked, but I think this is a perfect place to mention it. This opening scene right here, after we get to the credits, we get the view of this coffin right here. Baron von Frankenstein. Is that other than the humor, with how this film was shot, with how it's edited and all that, it could legitimately play as a sequel to one of the classic Universal films. Like, you could do this as a sequel to the first two that ignores Son and all the other ones. You could do this as a delayed sequel to Son or whatnot. You can just do it a random sequel to any of them, especially since in the latter half of that series, the continuity is loose anyway. You could play it as a sequel to that, only it has more humor in it. And I think that's the reason it works. You could probably also do it as a sequel to Abbott and Costello, but That one you'd really have to stretch it a bit. Then getting back on track to the point I was going to make before that. Gene and Mel, oh, nice little dissolve there. I really miss dissolves and stuff in cinema. Something that seems to have gone by the wayside. And Gene and Mel, they got together, they wrote the screenplay together, and you could definitely tell it's equal parts both of their films. And since they were the creative force behind it, one behind the camera and one in front of it as well, it does mesh well. And this scene right here is our introduction to Gene Wilder on camera in this movie, and that, of course, is Dr. Frankenstein giving a lecture on the nervous system. And there you can see him drawing it on there, motor impulses and all that. And this whole scene sets up just what type of character this Victor Frankenstein's going to be. Right here. Intentionally pronouncing his name differently. That right away tells you all we need to know about him right at this point. And of course, this also raises a question. If your forebearer was known for something as infamous as the famous Dr. Frankenstein, how would you feel? How much would you try to distance yourself from him, especially if you carry the same surname? I know we have some real life examples taken to the extreme. I mean, like Hitler's relatives, for instance. A lot of them have distanced themselves from it. Some have changed their names. Some have changed their names and have decided not to have offspring for fear of something like that. I think that takes it a little too far, but you can imagine if you just pull that back a bit, you can imagine what someone in this situation would feel like. And right here, Wilder's showing off his good range as an actor. I mean, there's comedic chops here, but we also see some of his dramatic stuff. This scene, we see a little bit of both, and his natural reactions. That was the one thing I really loved about Gene Wilder as an actor. His natural reactions. I haven't seen all of his films in their entirety, but just from the clips I've seen of a lot of his films in between this and his later stuff, you can definitely see it. And of course, he has probably one of the best cinematic insults of all time. I believe it was some Silver Streak. Those of you who don't know what it is, it's him yelling at a guy, "You stupid, ignorant son of a bitch, dumb bastard! Jesus Christ, I met some dumb bastards in my time, but you all do them all. Get over there!" Just gotta love that, just the way he says it and the look on his face. There's some parts of this film where you could probably put that into. But now, when Gene and Mel were going to get this film done, the first person they approached, which was the first studio they approached, was Columbia Pictures. Now, part of TriStar and all that. And they were game on it, but they balked at the black and white aspect. And by the way, some of this info I am pulling from IMDb. Now, this one little thing is a combination of two facts I found on there. So if you guys have actually heard different in other interviews, let me know below. But it mentioned that Mel was talking with the studio and they would let him do it in black and white, but put it on color stock so they could show it in Peru. That was their very verbatim reasoning for it. Mel fought and was like, no, 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 we're not going to do that because we do it like that. You're going to say, oh, now we got to show it there, we got to show it there, we got to show it in color now because then you're going to end up screwing us. And of course, the deal fell through, and Mel took the project to Fox in the more accommodating Alan Ladd Jr. And if you know your history, Alan Ladd Jr. is also the one who greenlit Alien years later. But of course, that was after Star Wars made it big, so you got to add that caveat here. But this film, Mel had shown he actually was a draw. I mean, he'd already won the Oscar for Best Screenplay for the producers, and this was on the heels of Blazing Saddles, which this film did use in its marketing campaign, directed by Mel Blazing Saddles Brooks in black or in white. No offense. I did not get what the meaning of that joke in the trailer was until I saw Blazing Saddles, and then researched how controversial. Well, it's not really super controversial, but it does touch on some controversial subject matter. I mean, making fun of the racist pricks, especially in the time period that the film would have been set. And candid, I think would be the right word. to use to describe it. Its use of the N word. So I guess that's part of the whole joke there. Now, before I get past it, they just referenced Darwin in The Worm and Spaghetti. Now, that Darwin that they're talking about is not Charles Darwin. No, 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 no. It's his grandfather, and forgive me if I butcher this name, those of you who are linguists and whatever you call a namist, I guess. Erasmus. Definitely sounds like an interesting name to use. Now, this Darwin is actually mentioned in the original novel, so this is another callback. Which is another good thing about this film, is it not only references the classic Universal Frankenstein series, but it does a lot of callbacks to the novel. That's one of them. At a later point, we're going to be seeing Dr. Frankenstein reading from his grandfather's diary, and a lot of those quotes are from the novel. And that thing I said about reacting naturally, this right here. Well, that line right there, that always got a laugh out of my grandmother when we used to watch this film. Oh, this right here, if you look closely at his leg, you notice there's a pad there. Which is like, I get they had to put a pad there for protection, but couldn't they find a thinner one that would actually be a bit more natural? It's mainly, you notice it if you look at the difference between his thighs. You're like, "Eee." And that probably would hurt, stabbing yourself in the thigh like that. I mean, not the worst place you could stab yourself with a scalpel, but it would still hurt like hell. But getting back onto the point I was on, I know a couple times in this commentary already I've gotten on side tangents, but when moments pop up when I'm in the middle of another story, it's kind of hard not to, pump the brakes in order to talk about something when it's topical. I try my best to keep from doing that, but it's one of the curses of having ADHD. You start on one thing and then get onto another. Uh, the original cut of this film was twice as long, and it was considered to be abysmal by everyone who saw it. Now, obviously, even with all the re-releases, that has not been shown. But if you look at all the deleted scenes, you can kind of see it. I mean, it's been a long time since I've watched a lot of these deleted scenes, but from what I remember, a lot of them did not really have a lot of comedic merit. There was like one I remember that had like an okay joke, and that's the nearsighted bandit who tries to rob the monster, and the punchline was at the end where he reveals he's nearsighted. He's like, "I gotta get glasses. I gotta see these people." And then before it cut to the doctor's lecture, there was supposed to be a scene that was a reading of the will. It's chuckle worthy, but you can see why they cut it. I mean, it's overly long, does slow the pacing down a little bit at the beginning. It does kind of match the tone and tenor of the original Frankenstein series, which of course is what you're going for when you want to open it. But you don't really need it, because the fact that he's holding that box and then cutting to this scene, it implies enough without having to show it. It's one of those things where you already have enough information, you don't need to overdo it. In novel form it worked, but on the screen, yeah, you're just giving them too much info. And there's a little thing that, of course, we do a little bit more nowadays. The thing about that cut was that for every joke that worked, there were 3 that fell flat. Editing, they cut out all the jokes that didn't, and because of that, with the whole scenes, the will reading, get to see more of the Frankenstein family, see them get a little anal retentive about the fact that Victor didn't show up to the will reading, trying to get them to use that as a reason to cut him out. Get to see all the other ones. Makes you wonder, why aren't they there when Victor shows up, but I guess they don't want to show up. Hopefully, once the film's story ends, Victor is able to reconnect with them. This is a nice little scene right here where the married couple are having the same conversation in both English and German. And you get to see the old timey train. Of course, Transylvania would not be in a German speaking place, but, you know, movie Germany. It's one of those things. Now, I didn't put this in my notes because it was easy to remember, but this part right here, I thought it was funny for a different reason, because I thought he was offering to moon him when I was younger. Then I found out about shoe shining, so and all that. But it still struck me as a little weird. Like, what is that scene there for? It's one of those things that at the time the audience would have got it. It's one of the few little meta jokes thrown throughout that are not connected to the Frankenstein series. And it's a reference to a song about, 89 and Give Me a Shine. So it's a musical reference. Now, this scene right here, this definitely feels like it's straight out of Universal Frankenstein film. Oh, and there it is. This little moment right here. This is where you really get to see how the humor of this film plays. It's pronounced Frankenstein and Igor, and there's Marty Feldman. You couldn't get a more perfect actor in order to play this weirdo character just with those eyes alone. I mean, his face was his fortune, as John Cleese says. I mean, the producers and all that really were a little weird about putting him in front of the camera before he hit it big because they're like, what about the way he looks? What about the way he looks? And it worked. Now, cinematographer Gerald, I'm going to probably butcher this last name too, Hirschfield. When they were first shooting this film, he was really emulating the look of the classic Universal Frankenstein films. I don't know how much of that actually ended up in the film, but I would not be surprised if the beginning of this scene is one of them. Now, after a few days of this, he noticed Mel didn't really look the happiest, so he asked him, like, what's going on, Mel? It's like, you're emulating the look. And he's like, isn't that what we're going for? No, we want to satirize it. And then he was like, well, you didn't tell me. Now, part of that was that they didn't tell him directly. It was through Gene that he found that out. And you can kind of see why they would want to satirize it, where it's a loving homage, but you can kind of tell that they're also making fun of it a little bit. And with how the backgrounds are, the set design and all that, you can definitely tell. But it's not like winking at it too much. It's a loving little homage. And right here, we get the introduction of our next character, which is, yep, Inga, the laboratory assistant, played by the talented Terry Garr. And that basically sums up her character, the buxom, attractive blonde with the German accent. Now that's a new definition of rolling the hay. Not quite what you thought it was going to be, was it? Right there, another good shot. And Terry Garr, I really haven't seen that much of what she's in. I believe she was in Tootsie, if I remember right. Believe it or not, she had a small role in Dumb and Dumber. She was one of the background characters in there. It's one of those ones that unless you catch her in the back, you're like, really? She's in there? Makes me wonder how much you got paid for that one. Well, unless you get struck by it. There's another one of my favorite Igor moments right here. It makes me wonder if that was an ad lib idea he had and threw it at Gene and see how he liked it. Because this seems like one of those weird things that, like, I don't see that being written, but you never know. I mean, there's a few things in this movie that were definitely ad libbed, and you can kind of tell around the editing and all that. Oh, good old matte paintings. How I miss the. Definitely works to set the tone there. There we go, the courtyard scene again with the horses. And we're about to be introduced to Cloris Leachman's character. One of the moments that people who haven't even seen this film probably know about because of how often it's referenced. And it is one of those funny little moments. So, a little bit of humor coming up right here. Look at the size of those door knockers. And then once it pans back over to the good doctor. Typical Brooks humor there. You got to throw some of it in. And then here she comes, Cloris Leachman. I believe this is after she won the Academy Award already and started just doing whatever the heck she wanted with acting. But yeah, you can't begrudge her. She already won the Oscar, so have fun with her career. Now, The thing with this is that they tried to pass off that Blucher was the German word for glue, but it is nothing like it. I didn't go and write it in my notes, but it's nothing like it. But then could also be a reference to a Field Marshal Blucher, who was notorious for his cavalry charges. And of course, since in cavalry charges, horses are going to be a target, you can imagine that they would not be the biggest fans of people who share his surname. But in fact, no, it's supposed to be a hint that not all is right with this character. And she's probably not the nicest person to be around. And as Gene Wilder himself put, heaven knows what she does to them when no one else is around. Yep. And with it, there's probably my second favorite use of the gag right here when Igor turns around. Just look at his face afterwards, too. He knows what he's doing. Oh, that Igor. No one else could play him like Marty Feldman. Now, funny little thing I found out while compiling the notes for this is that apparently Inga and Igor, their names share a root where they're a variation on a Swedish name, Ingmar. Ingvar is, if I remember correctly. And right there, like, no flames, like, the look they shared is like, they can even tell there's not, something's not right with her. The cheese fell off Frau Blucher's cracker a long time ago, if you catch my drift. And that's supposed to be the, typical thing we see in a movie like this. Someone lets you into the castle and all that. It's like, why would you stay close to the empty candles? That's the look on his face right there. And there's the great-grandfather, Victor. He looks a little, it's a little trope thing of same actor playing a descendant of like their previous character. I see it in a lot of movies. I mean, even the Planet of the Apes series had it. Of course, there is family resemblances within generations. You'll see. I have photos going back to my own great grandfather through my patrilineal line, and you can definitely see the family resemblance. I mean, it's not straight 1-to-1, but you look at my face, you look at his face, you're like, oh, yep, these gentlemen are definitely related. You see it from them, you see it from him to my grandfather and his brother, then you see it down to my dad and his siblings and me, and even looking at my brother, you can definitely tell we're related. We've got the same freaking head shape, even accounting for our slightly different builds and weight. And also probably our weight fluctuates at the same thing. That right there was another ad lib, if I remember correctly. So even if it was scripted, it's one of those things like Ovaltine that just comes out of nowhere. Like if he doesn't want brandy or anything, why would he want Ovaltine? You can tell there's something weird, even more weird about Frau Blucher here. And then of course this next moment coming up is our next hint about something that's going to be revealed later. And the look on Victor's face says it all. He's like, like what is she doing? Now, they never really touch on it, but it makes you wonder what exactly happened to cause Victor's death. I mean, obviously, he would have been dead at this point from old age. But it's like, what happened? Did the villagers kill him? Did his own creature kill him or something? I know the deleted scene would kind of give a little insight because he still sounded spry when he was doing his recording, and as well as supposed to be read on the 100th anniversary of his death. This right here, a typical nightmare character has, but he's talking in his sleep. Like fighting the urge to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. You don't even need to hear the other side of the conversation to know what's going on. I just love the way he says his next line. I love how it is like the camera just slowly moving in on Victor, and then when it cuts right there, it's like the disappointing grandfather look. Like you're gonna follow. It's like you're gonna follow in my footsteps, and you're gonna like it. Damn it! Destiny. No escaping. It's like a mantra. And then here comes Inga. There was another piece of info I wanted to bring up. I'm trying to find it. This I didn't have time to put in my notes earlier, but it was about Madeleine Kahn that no, she apparently was hired for a different role in this film, but I want to find it in my notes, in the IMDb notes, real quick. It's one of those little interesting things. Oh yeah. This you gotta love this. They're poking right here. They're poking fun at the trope of the revolving door behind the bookcase. One of the meta things. I mean, it's more than just horror films. Mystery films have it too. Like book, nope. And then right here. Oh yeah, these candles. I have something in the notes about this one. What these candles are made out of. That we're about to see. They're made out of aluminum. I'm just trying to. Oh, here comes. Here comes. I'm trying to figure out how to open it without it turning completely. That's good. Well, this is not going to work the way you want it to. Ooh. I like how you don't see what he looks like at first. That looks like it hurt. I love how he gives his character that little pathetic voice. On the side of the bookcase. Oh, well, I think I'm having a ton of bleeding from this. No. Uh, oh, yeah, here. Those prop candles, they were made of aluminum pipe. And how we're going to see them in the next scene, there was a 100-watt projection bulb, excuse me, and they illuminated it by having a wire run up the sleeves of the actors and down pant legs. Of course, while doing the scenes, they got to remember where their marks are. They got to remember their lines. They got to remember to keep it out of the line of sight. I mean, it's not like in theater where you can do that. It's like, let's get this other one. Oh, yeah, the whole thing about close your robe and follow me. I forgot to comment on that line. That's kind of funny. And you can see it right there in this moment, closing her robe. Oh, yeah. Here's something interesting. Both Leachman and Kahn were nominated at the 75 Golden Globe Awards. Kahn was nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, and Leachman was nominated for Best Lead Actress. But Kahn has more screen time than Leachman. It's one of those weird things, just like with the True Grit remake. Like, really? Best Supporting Actress for. That's what happens, though. And here we go. We're about to find the Mad Doctor's Laboratory. Okay. This right here kind of would probably be what would happen if old door wasn't used for years. Would break like that. No, that shot I like right there. Definitely feels like one of those films out of the 40s. That's probably one of the shots that was done before they were told to satirize it. Now, before we get too far into this scene, oh yeah, the 3 years dead. These first two skulls are going to be this 3 years dead one. That one's a real skull. Right there, that's a real one. That one is not. That's a wax model. But this is a good jump scare joke right here. Freshly. I just love another example of Wilder's natural reaction. He goes from being scared to being a little annoyed while watching him singing, I ain't got nobody. But getting back onto it, one of the conditions that Mel had to agree to in order to do this film with Gene was that he had to not appear in the film physically, because he usually did. Like previous film, he played both Governor Lepetime and he played, one of the thugs in line. Of course, in later films, he'd star. I mean, he plays the lead in High Anxiety. He plays multiple roles in History of the World Part 1, including Moses, played the dual role of Yogurt and President Scrooge in Spaceballs, and of course, Friar Tuckman in Men in Tights, and of course, Van Helsing in Dracula Dead and Loving It. That line right there, that's one me and Jeff would use occasionally, like, damn your eyes! But he agreed not to appear physically on screen. Now, he still did appear in the film in other ways, like this monologue right here, which is a reference to the 1931 film. That is Mel Brooks' voice. You definitely tell if you listen to the subtleties, but he's changing it enough to sound more old-timey. And all this equipment that we see down here, that is not, I'm trying to think of the word. Reproduction. That is not reproduction equipment. That is the original equipment from the film. And the funny thing about that is that that was made by Ken Strickfaden. He kept that equipment for 40 years in his garage. And when Brooks was making this movie, he heard that not only was McFadden still alive, excuse me, Strickfaden, I don't know why I said McFadden, was still alive, but he was still living in LA, so he looked him up. I'm like, hey Ken, we're making a parody movie of the original Frankenstein series. You still have that equipment? Yeah. So Ken let them use it. It definitely does help with the feel of the film, both from the parody standpoint and from feeling like an actual Frankenstein film standpoint. But in addition to that, Ken actually got a credit in this film, a thank you credit nonetheless, and he was never credited in the original films. But of course, that's common in older Hollywood, where it's the lead of the department who would be thanked or acknowledged, and not the entire department. Nowadays, it seems like more people are. I mean, look how long credit sequences usually go on for. I think only the most lowly people on the totem pole are not thanked in the credits. Usually, the heads and everyone else that works are done. I mean, they even got like aides to blah blah to Mr. or Mrs. blah 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 in the credits, so that would make sense. And this scene right here is the beginning of Victor's transformation into a true Frankenstein. That right there, how I did it, this is where we get the quotes from the novel. Some of it's a little modified, but this is where we start to get the direct quotes, which is another nice touch, especially if you're going to have him learn how to create life from his great-grandfather's work. But yeah, thank you, Ken. You did excellent work, and now nice to see there. Got to move on from that. This right here, they're falling asleep from because it's essentially technobabble when you think about it, even though it is still great work. Like, he's reading his great-grandfather's journal. This right here, another example of him reacting naturally. Definitely see he's starting to go off the deep end. He's starting to become a mad doctor. And I love the way the makeup and the hair is done on him when he looks up here. And then the look on his face as he looks in the camera and the lighting. And then combined with that facial hair, it definitely makes him seem like a madman. The painting. He's like, yes, my grandson. And then right there, them eating breakfast while they get ready for their plans. Oh, look at that. Igor is using his pencil to eat. Like, I don't think that's the healthiest thing. Then again, some people have smoked the pencil shavings. I think that'd be a little weirder. Now, this is the one thing that's like, yeah, making the monster bigger would make it easier to do. Oh, this line right here. Right there, reacting naturally as he's mulling it over. He's like, yeah. But The thing with that is, like, if you make the monster bigger than yourself, as we've seen time and again, it's going to overpower you. As James Ruffin said, if you're going to create a monster, make sure you have a way to turn it off. That was Dr. Frankenstein's biggest mistake. Alright, and there's the drawing of the man. Yep, and that is essentially what the monster is going to look like. I like this transition shot that's about to come up when he lets go of it. Transition from the photo. Then it dissolves right into a hanging man. Probably did something bad. And I like with how that thing is done where you can kind of see what body parts they took from him and turned into the monster later on. I like how he says that, and yet they still put a cross on him. Even if he did something heinous like murder, they're still going to put a cross. And this whole scene right here is a parody of the opening scene of the original Frankenstein after, right, even some of the same dialogue, like right here. Get down, fool. He even says it in a similar manner. And they're going to wait for them to come out. And there they go. About to do some grave robbing. Looking around, going over to the mound. I love the way Marty Feldman moved back there. He's like, it was like a dance. Flinging dirt haphazardly because he's doing it by hand. And there they go. They got the body. And this line right here. This really sells the seed right here. You just had to say it. And then he's going to look at him. Like that line, that's what that look says. You just had to say it. Yeah. And then, of course, it's like, what else could go wrong? It's already raining. We gotta get the body out of here. What else could go wrong? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And that rain didn't last too long. The score in this film is another thing I haven't talked about. The score in this film is excellent. It definitely does feel like it's a classic Universal film with that, too. I mean, from that opening scene score that turns into the lullaby that we've heard a couple times already, to that where the tempo picks up to go with the scene. And then, of course, right here, policeman on the scene. Well, they got to hide the body, make sure he doesn't get too suspicious. Dead hand. John Morris, he's the one that conducted the score. I knew it was one of his freaking collaborators, but John Morris's scores are usually always pretty good. This one's no exception. I'm surprised the constable doesn't think anything's wrong, amiss. Preferably brandy, because that will warm up the extremities. Now, Gene Wilder, from an acting standpoint, I've said, he reacts naturally to a lot of the stuff that happens here. But especially if you watch some of the blooper reels, you can see that he was constantly corpsing. For those of you who don't know what that means, that's a term to describe when you break character by smiling. It's more a wrestling phrase, but it definitely works here, where you can definitely see them trying to stifle a laugh, doing their best to keep from breaking character with the laugh. But sometimes it would take up to 15 takes for him to summon a straight face to where it's just not funny anymore, where he's able to finally manage it. And Leachman even said he would kill every take and nothing was done about it. I have a feeling she said that in jest. But if she meant that seriously, it's like he's the writer and the star. Of course, he's not going to get punished for it. Which, well, this right here, the shifting hump gag. That was an ad lib and a genius one. What Feldman did was that he was shifting his hump back and forth for days, waiting to see if anybody noticed it. Nobody did. Now, IMDb doesn't mention how it happened, but I have a feeling it probably happened when they were watching dailies and someone finally went, wait a minute. Then they thought about it and they're like, you know what, that actually would be funny as a gag, and we get that moment. You're like, what hump? And this part right here is a whole parody of the scene in the original where Fritz breaks in to steal the brain, which, that right there, easiest place to break into. Good old Igor. But I just love that visual gag, like, drop brains through slots. It's like, what type of place is renting brains out? But that's one of the ridiculous things about here that betrays the parody nature of it. Hans Delbruck, scientist and saint. Now, there was a real Hans Delbruck. He was a 19th century German military historian and a professor at the University of Berlin. And he linked warfare to politics and economics, which standard nowadays, but back then that was a whole big revelation. So scientists definitely. Saint would depend on who you would ask. His son was Max, who was a biochemist and Nobel laureate. And there it is. Do not use this brain. Abnormal. What type of uses are they describing where an abnormal brain would not work? I mean, if you're just examining him, I don't know why. So that's one of those weird things. Of course, we know in the original because it was a criminal brain, but here it's like, why is it abnormal? Or as Igor is going to later say, abnormal. Oh, and here it comes. We actually see the body up close instead of like in the original where it's all covered. But then that's because we actually see the monster actually get up off the slab this time. Which in the original you kind of built suspense by not seeing the monster directly and then not seeing them get off the slab, but for this one, with all the other films in there where we actually see the monster strapped to the table like this and either given more life or revived, it would make sense that we actually see it like this. And that's our first appearance of Peter Boyle in here. Yeah, another nice little reference there. Yeah, it's in the book. Of course, that's how they did it. And just look at that these angles, this lighting, all that set, all the electrodes going. Definitely feels like a classic Frankenstein film with humor. I know I've said that. There's the humor right there. I know I said it a lot, but it bears repeating. Good point, bears repeating. Yeah, Hump's coming up right here. I love the sound that they made for the whenever something touches the hump. I also love the walk and turn that Feldman gave Igor here. It definitely makes him feel like a hunchback character. And of course, I didn't comment on it earlier when Igor mentions that he's the grandson of the original Hunchback and all that, but makes me wonder if he's been waiting all of his life to work for a mad scientist like this. Of course, he gets paid for it. I mean, he says the rates have gone up, which that whole scene is like that just writes itself. Well, my grandfather used to work for your grandfather. It's probably the best place to mention this, but Gene and Mel, despite them having a good working relationship, they did get into one major tiff during the production. I don't know if it's over one other thing that Gene really had to fight for, which I'll mention right afterwards. But it was quite a fight where Mel just stormed off after throwing a tantrum. And then 10 minutes later, Gene gets a call from him and he was like, "Who is that madman you had in your house? I could hear the yelling all the way over here. You should never let crazy people into your house. They could be dangerous." Gene took that as Mel's way of saying sorry. Now, the thing that he was reluctant to put in is a scene we're going to see later in this movie, and that's the putting on the Ritz scene. He was hesitant to it. He felt it would distract from the fidelity to the Universal horror films, because there's not really anything like a musical number in there. Says anybody before they watch Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, where there's a whole scene that kind of stops the film for a second, where there's this guy in a baritone voice singing, We'd like to toast a happy host of a son on the way. It's a different type of tone and all that. It's more like old timey, where you're like, here, did a different movie just wander into this movie? But it just shows the Universal one did have their precedent. Now, Gene argued for its inclusion, and Mel changed his mind by going, it's in. Gene was like, why'd you change your mind like that? And Mel's reasoning was, if Gene is going to argue for it like this, then yeah, we'll keep it in. Now, I wonder if that's connected to their other argument, but if not, it's like just one of those simple things that co-writers are going to have it. And it's a good thing Gene did, because that's one of the funniest scenes in the whole movie, which we'll talk to that when we get there. Like, let's talk about that mad scientist vibe right here. Give my creation life. And of course, this is one of the few parts of the film where the monster is not played by Peter Bullock, because you can't really do that with him. You know, wax figurehead and switching the stuff. I like the effect here where you see his face illuminating, see his skeletal structure beneath it. He's like, seems a little worried, alright, and he's like, bring me down. I like the frizzled hair. It's curly, but then also a little wavy. Definitely leads to the mad scientist vibe. And here they are, they're turning it down. And this is where the parody of the creation scene really comes into play. Because most of the time in the Universal Frankenstein movies, when the monster is born, he immediately gets up, you know, that it's alive. Or when it's revived, the monster immediately starts moving and gets up, breaks free from his restraints, and is like, "Arr, monster!" Arr. But here, nothing yet. And look at it, he's looking at him like, what? And they're looking like, what? Did it work? I mean, Igor did start the scene by going, are you sure this is how they did it? Maybe not, it seems. And there he goes, he's checking for our heartbeat and for our pulse. He's thinking, I'm sure I did everything right. There he is, he's checking. Igor's looking around like, did we do everything right? Angus, she's like, oh no. And this, the reacting naturally thing of, say it again, it adds to the comedy here. We got to see him go a little bit more crazy in a different way here. Shows why Gene was a master at his craft right here. And that's going to have one of my favorite Igor lines following it. There he goes, petting the top of the monster's head. And here he comes. He's strangling a dead body there. It seems like he's having a mental breakdown right now. I mean, he was a normal person, wanted to distance himself from the family legacy, comes in here, gets seduced by it, and then it fails. And then I go right here. That's probably one of the few fourth wall breaks in this whole movie, and you could really also say it's not a fourth wall break, you just look it off like quiet dignity and grace. And finally, we get the villagers. This is the part where it does go a little meta, but it's one of those things that you can imagine it like in Fun, where the villagers are distrustful of the Frankensteins, and they don't want them there. It's that same vibe where, you know, they hate the Frankensteins because of what's gone on, and they're not going to trust them because they're all doctors and scientists. Of course, go with the whole mad scientist vibe there, like some of the other Universal Frankenstein films. They're the elders. There he is talking about what's happened before. 5 times before. Could be, that's a nice little reference to how many Universal Frankenstein movies there were. You could put any number of events between them, like even that missing one in between Bride and Son. Oh, there he is, Inspector Kempf, played by the great Kenneth Mars. And I love that look where he has the monocle over the eye patch. Apparently that was his idea, and once he was told he could do that, he said yes. And of course, he's a parody of the Inspector character from Son of Frankenstein, even down to the wooden arm. Unlike that Inspector character, we never do get a reason why he has a wooden arm. And I love the voice that Kenneth gives him. Combined with the facial hair and everything about him, you really do buy him playing this character, even if it is partially played for laughs, as we're about to see in a moment. Definitely believe his air of authority. But in one of the deleted scenes where it was a meeting of Victor and the Inspector, that's where we would find out the origin of his arm. It's the same as the character he parodies. It was ripped off by a monster. It was ripped off by the monster your grandfather created. There comes they're about to find the running gag of his character. Where the villagers can't understand a word he said. He's like, footsteps, footsteps. Oh, yeah, that's a joke that really works. That's one of those ones I wonder if Gene already had that joke in mind, or when he was writing it with Mel's like, how about this? Perfect way to parody the character, because there's not really much else from the original character they parody other than taking the use of the wooden arm to the extreme. And right here, we're about to see something that a lot of us as kids probably wish we could have done to talk back to our parents without getting a smack upside the head, or at least wondered about. Now he has. I love the look on her face in that close up. I just love how this does not have anything to do with the subject at hand, and yet it's still funny. It's like, what was Igor doing in the bathroom all day and night? Was that when he was a teenager and probably doing. And our parody of the creation not working is about to end, because as we're about to find out, it was a delayed response. Now, this dessert they're going to be eating here is actually going to be some type of cherry cake. Was just looking at it from that distance, it actually looks like it'd be good. Like, I think it's like Black Forest cherry cake, if I remember right. I just love how they slowly piece together what caused the sound after this little scene right here. There's another thing I love about this film is long takes. Oh, I really do miss long takes in most films instead of cutting back and forth. Of course, the angle also dictates it, and this is one of those angles where you can really get away with a long take. Along with a lot of angles other directors like Quentin Tarantino used, but especially his ones, because then it's like, yeah, frame it and all that. Oh, here comes it's alive. Leads into probably my favorite little moment in the whole film. I know I've said some variations of that, but this moment coming up is probably my favorite. I like it. I like how he's moving his eyes like, what the heck did I just wake up to? And the original Universal series, I highly doubt that him letting the monster go probably went as well as it's about to. Well, at least at first. Before it really goes away, you know it will. And this right here, this just shows why Peter Boyle was a genius playing this character. Why he was an excellent actor is that you really do believe him as a character as he plays. Even a character like this is the monster. He has an innocence to it that you would not imagine that type of character to have, but yet it does, and it works so well. Just, just something simple as setting up, you really do buy Peter in this role. Of course, here you can definitely tell he's wearing a bald cap, which is funny because years later he would not need a bald cap for something like that because he was legitimately bald. But at this point, he still had a lot of his hair because he was in his 40s at this point. I don't think he started balding immensely until like a decade later. Another thing I will say about this is I love the design. It's unique, but you can see what it's being attributed to. They can't really use too much of the classic design, even if it is a parody, which would be protected because, they'd still be able to sue. It's pleasantly familiar without violating any copyrights, but still fresh enough. Oh, here it is right here. Imagine you get a free charades just to tell them to give them the thing, even though it should still be fresh in their minds as you just mentioned it. And the thing that also makes this is throughout the whole scene, Peter's face, if you look up at the far right corner, it does not alter. He just strangled the doctor like that, letting the gag go on. It's ridiculous, but it really does help it. But then again, it's also one of those things like you can't really do much while you're waiting for the rest of the scene to play out. Another example of long take. And then here it comes. Yep, and he just got knocked out. And there he goes. And here comes Gene with another natural reaction right here. Then we're going to see another one later, which is what really makes the humor of this scene. Right there, just barely survived getting killed by the monster. Now, if you haven't figured it out, those two characters are going to be linked romantically before this movie ends. If you've seen the movie already, you know that. But I just love the little subtle hints at the beginning where you're like, is she just being that caring towards the doctor, or is there something more? I mean, earlier when he said, elevate me. This right here, the finding out of the wrong brain. I like that he's up front right here. And you can tell that in character, Gene is trying not to, get super angry, but Victor is like, I want to find out the info of what it says. And Gene, the way he plays it perfectly makes this scene's humor. Makes me wonder how, if there are any corpsing moments in this scene, what they look like. Those would probably be fun to watch on a loop. You can't really read, can you? I just like the nervousness in Igor's face in this moment where he like realizes he's screwed. He knows he's in trouble. His eyes. Repeat. And then knock, knock, knock. Marty's eyes is also what adds to the comedy of this whole thing. Whenever they all have to react to something, they all bug out like, oh no. Now, after the tie, this is where the introduction scene that I mentioned earlier was supposed to be. I'd say, other than finding out about the arm, there's not really much of that scene accomplishes because the humor there is not that good. I know it's brought back in the stage play, which there it works. As from what little I've seen on film, I think it's better to cut directly to them mid conversation and you're like, oh, now we know what they're talking about. And they're playing darts to boot. Another good use for the wooden arm. Got a good point there. Right here. Cheater! Oh, this moment right here. This is going to be Mel's other cameo here is the Shrieking Cat. But I love how he gets under the doctor's skin with all the words he uses. I like that he knows the word chromosome. Right through the window. He's feeling a little guilty, but he's like, oh, he's got that one backwards. There with the cat. Now, as he leaves, there's a gargoyle on the side of the building. Some say it looks like Alfred Hitchcock, others say it resembles Mel Brooks. I've always forget to look at it. It's been a while since I watched the film, so when it gets there, we'll see which one it looks like. I love this little gag right here. His arm is stuck. And I love the little added gag here. There be more darts than there were thrown out, and all the tires are there. Off to the side. Let's see. He's leaving the castle. There's a dart off to this. Like, where is it? I guess I wasn't looking enough because I didn't see it. Oh, and here comes Frau Blucher, the first time we see her since her introduction moment. And then he's awake again. And here comes the last horse joke. So what were they going to do, I wonder? Were they going to dissect the monster like Van Sloan's character was going to do in the original? Oh yeah, I love some of the monsters' reactions in this one. Peter, he's gonna really hate a certain word. Some lamb. And then here comes the melody I mentioned. I like it actually as a story purpose. I think this is supposed to be a reference to how the original Igor, that's Igor with a Y, is played by Bela Lugosi. He had that little thing with a flute that was able to manipulate the monster. He played in tandem to get the monster to go places. It's been a while since I watched Sun, so forgive me if I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but it seems like it's a reference to that, because just look at it. He's mesmerized by it. And that whole thing of him trying to catch butterflies, that was all Peter. I mean, the only thing I can complain about Cloris's performance here is like, she's not even moving her fingers at all. You can definitely tell she's not playing it. She did all of it. One of the trailers uses a different take right there where she's more like, say it. He was my boyfriend, and then knocked the monster to the electricity, and there goes the monster. He's about to escape. Why would you do that? But again, she's a crazy lady, so who knows why she does any of the stuff she does. There goes the monster yelling at what brought him to life, and here comes the old "what have I done" moment that a lot of these doctors and the Frankenstein movies have. Oh, yep, because if she does, you're screwed. I love it. And of course, here comes another parody scene. The little girl in a flower scene from the original film. Which I don't know if this scene would have been cut out in the re-releases, but of course it took on a life of its own by the time this film was made, where even if people had never seen the cut of the film with it in it, they knew of it. And then right here, putting the boards up, parents going to talk. They realize neither of us put Helga to bed. There he goes. That's the thing I like about this is that even though the monster has all this brute strength and all that, it still has that innocent thing about it, and Peter Boyle played it pretty well. And there it goes. Love this little reference right there. Really looks up like what to throw in now. You would look upstairs. Well, what's about to happen makes me wonder if Helga planned this. Boink, and there she goes, off to bed. Probably. And there comes another reference. That's a reference to the original one. Here we go. A reference to both the novel and the Bride of Frankenstein, and that is the blind man. This is more a reference to his appearance in Bride of Frankenstein, even down to Ave Maria being played. Whereas in that one, the blind man was playing it on a violin. Here, he's listening to a record. And of course, this blind man is none other than Gene Hackman. Of course, under a beard and all that, but yep, that's Hackman. Now, apparently he played tennis with Gene Wilder around this time, and when he heard that Gene was making this movie with Mel, he's like, I want in. Because he had wanted to do some comedy for a little bit, and he figured this would be the right one. And this whole scene with him, it took 4 days to shoot, and is essentially 4 minutes of screen time. So I guess that goes down to 1 minute of screen time a day, which some people were like, really? But when you look at how filming is done, all the different angles, moving up the track shots and all that, also rehearsing and getting the timing and everything down, yeah, I can see it taking 4 days, especially with makeup and all that. And of course, they had to do some reshoots with the makeup, with certain parts due to makeup continuity issues, but that might have been done long after Gene left. Now, I don't remember if I saw this film before I saw Bride of Frankenstein, but even with it, I think I might have seen it before, but even without the context of that one, it's still funny. You know, it's like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If you don't understand what that movie's satirizing, it's still funny. But when you know what it's satirizing, it's funnier. So after becoming a fan of Bride, this scene became even funnier to me. Because that one also had a soup scene. Of course, he just takes the bowl and then fills it from the pot. Which one thing about the character design of the monster I didn't mention, I like that instead of having a bolt on there, it also has a zipper. And right here, the soup right into the crotch. I love that. But the hands that were pouring that soup, those were Mel Brooks's. It makes me wonder, like, how bad was the makeup continuity issue? And of course, another reference here, the wine. I mean, the monster tries soup, wine, and smoking for the first time in Bride of Frankenstein. So here they're parodying that. I mean, doesn't get his soup, doesn't get his wine. See, Peter could have some good reactions too. Like, but the makeup continuity thing makes me wonder if it just looked bad in the close-ups. But even with that, he still notices a difference in the makeup between shots. Like if you look at those wider shots, it kind of looks like there's lines around certain parts of his face where in the close-up it doesn't exist, like right there. And then there's a couple other shots where you can notice it. And of course, not a reference to smoking, but you can already tell where this joke's gonna go just based on how Peter's holding it in his hand. Oh, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good. But yeah, with all that, you can understand why it was only 4 days. Sorry, I got off a little bit of that. Now, one line that Gene is gonna say in a second that was not in the script. And even without knowing that he ad-libbed that, you can kind of tell that wasn't in the script because that does not seem like a line that you would script. I mean, I've said that already, but of the two, this definitely does not feel like a scripted line. I love the delay there where he's like looking at it like, phew. And his thumb was actually on fire there. They coated it with something that would alight, but it would protect his thumb. And it's a nice little moment there. Here it comes. This is a line that has been referenced time and again because of how funny it is and it could fit with any situation. Now, you notice how quickly after that it fades to black. Part of that is the first time he did that, the crew cracked up so much that they had to cut it quickly in editing. They could have used a different take, but he just couldn't get it right like the first one. And there's that thing with the makeup I mentioned a little bit before. But yeah, and that was a perfect way to end that blind man scene. Now that bandit scene probably would have been in the film right before here. I'm actually glad they cut it out, even other than the fact it's not super funny, because it kind of disrupts the flow. But I can see why it would have been there, like the monster having a bunch of shenanigans before getting captured again. But I think only having the two that are references and parodies of events that happened in the classic films works best. And there they are, they got the sedative. Oh, he's out. Probably because he's laying full force on him. And there comes another fun scene right here where he's going to try to talk some sense into the monster. And there's Frau Blucher. It makes you wonder, like, why are they still allowing her in the castle? Why are they going to help? Like, I guess I kind of figure, like, oh, yeah, she'll probably still help, too. I mean, she's trying to help in her own weird way, but yeah. Uh-oh. Oh, I love that. You have a lot of faith in your boss, don't you, dare, Igor? There they go, locking it, make sure no one can get out. Here we go, stepping carefully. Monster's all chained up like he was in the original. He just woke it. I just love how his eyes go like that when he realizes he just woke the monster up and he's like, I'm out of here. This moment. I was joking. He's trying his best to get out of there while the monster's ripping the chains apart. And the only person who is following the doctor's orders is Frau Blucher. And there goes the monster breaking out. Time to kick some buddies thinking. I love this right here. Says that and the monster's like, what? Handsome where? Handsome is as handsome does. trying to go all psychoanalytical with the monster and feed him to him. Like, yeah, I'm building it, playing into the monster's ego right here. Then right here, Peter's facial expressions right here. Right here too. He's never heard praise before and all that. He's all happy. And like with the makeup, I haven't commented on it yet. Like with the original, the makeup was done in green, even though the movie's in black and white. It just adds a unearthly quality to the tone, even though it all comes in the same color on screen. It just adds a little bit of that. There's something you can tell. There's something off about his skin, even though it's basically just like maybe a little bit of a darker white. There, Peter's eyes like what? And then this moment right here, fully embracing his heritage now. I kind of like the way that Peter tilts his head up as the scene fades. Like, Frankenstein? I thought that was my name. At least that's the way I've always taken it. Now, this moment right here, this is something you would probably have never seen in any of the other ones because of mainly what happens. Either the monster gets loose, kills people, and all that. But it makes me wonder, in those classic films, how would the public at large have reacted if Henry or any of his sons had unveiled the monster to the public in a form like this? And of course, also makes me wonder since they're in the back and one of them's the inspector, what he must be thinking. I thought he said he was not going to do this, so what's going on here? Probably also they're like, oh, this should be good for a laugh, or we're going to have to do our job and rush the stage. Either way, it should be a productive evening. I just love this moment right here. The only person clapping is the one introducing him. You see none of them. In Japan, that might be a mark of respect, but there, I think that's an insult. Trying to get into it. I love the reactions right here. There's gonna be a side angle as he keeps going on where you see one of them like moving and all that. Like, oh yeah, tell me more of this story. That guy right there where he's like putting his mouth up to his mustache, lips, like, oh, tell me more. And here he comes on stage. Now, the thing with I wonder if Mel had gotten his way originally and decided to cut out the putting on the Ritz number that ends this scene, how would this whole scene have naturally gone to its conclusion? Would you make it like, would you make the monster freak out for another reason and then the police rush the stage? If that's the case, it would feel more like a normal Universal one and not a loving tribute that also satirizes some other stuff. Maybe just cut the scene entirely. I don't know. They would have figured it out, but I don't think the scene would be as memorable. I'm also glad that Mel decided to keep it in after seeing an audience reaction with it. That was his reaction with "Walk This Way." I mean, that whole gag came and went, and I didn't talk about it. It's such a minor moment, but he was going to cut it because he thought that moment was too corny. Which I can kind of understand. It's one of those moments like, walk this way, this way. It's a little funny gag, but not super, but it got a good reaction, and it's been referenced multiple times. Spaceballs referenced it, and then, of course, Men in Tights referenced it. And it was also inspiration for Aerosmith, because one night when they were recording one of their albums, they took a break to go watch this movie, and it inspired their song Walk This Way, at least the title of it. And one thing must be pointed out is that the song they're about to sing, they're using the later lyrics that are not as offensive. I mean, I'm not going to read the words as they originally were, but if I remember right, there is some. I think there's at least one N-bomb in the original lyrics. And it kind of suits it better to do the later ones. I love the way Peter says putting on the Ritz in character in this scene. This whole song and dance number. There's so many reasons that I would love to see this movie up on the big screen, but just being able to hear this coming out of of the big surround system and also seeing a whole audience react to this is one of them. Especially if it's an audience full of people who've never watched the film in its entirety. uh, you got to also give Peter credit for doing this in the platform shoes. It probably makes it a lot more difficult. And here it comes. Busted light. And then there the audience just turns on him like that. And then it's like they start throwing stuff at him. It's like, you just got traumatized, by that, and you're going to start throwing stuff at him? Not the right thing to do. There it comes. That thing I mentioned earlier about stop the monster? There's the example of why you should be able to stop your monster. And there, right there, we just saw a cameo by Marty Feldman outside of the Igor makeup playing the pianist. And here comes the cops. While the monster has his superhuman strength, you get enough people and they can overwhelm him. As we just see right now. And as we saw when they overwhelmed the Boris Karloff monster and then hung and tied him up like Jesus. There was a little bit of that symbolism too, but not as heavy-handed. And there he is with the super choker and all the people heckling him in the jail cell. I don't know what they're going at. He didn't really do super much. Are they doing it just because he's an artificial person? A golem, to use another term? Now, this moment right here is going to lead into another scene that was cut out. It's a nice little scene, but in the grand scheme of things, I do understand why it was cut. And that was, this is going to lead to the beginning of their actual relationship over the course of the film. And the way that it's edited in the final film, right, where we're going to go from this, where Inga's saying, I wish I could relieve this tension, to the next scene where we see them in the upper echelon of the laboratory, having had fun on the platform. See right there, does it go down? That they have just had coitus. The seduction scene was supposed to be longer, including Inga asking what the speed of light is, and it's a nice little moment, but it probably would work better on stage than in a film, because on stage you can kind of build the timing around the audience, but here, just cutting from there to there works better. And plus, it's funnier to see his reaction in the cut to this, and where he's putting down, holding the thing, and he has a cigarette in his mouth already. And right now, we're about to get the reintroduction of Madeleine Kahn's character Elizabeth. I love this line that Cloris is about to say, especially given the context of what's happening right here. He's gonna need more than a time, and I love that. And this scene right here, this is one of the scenes that took the most amount of takes because of corpsing. And it's because of something that happens at the end of the scene involving that fur that Madeleine Kahn is wearing around her neck. I'm sure everybody knows about this, but at the end of this scene, following the line, "You take the blonde, I'll take the one in the turban," Marty Feldman would bite, when they start going like, "Rah, rah," and then actually bite into the fur. But every time he did it, he'd have a chunk of the fur in his mouth. And when they were trying to do the lines, they'd be like, "I was talking about the luggage. Stop that." I mean, there's even one of the takes where he's like, where Wilder put his hand out and was like, "Give it." Now that would have actually been funny in the final film if they had managed to do a take where they didn't break character from laughing too hard at the absurdity of it. But it's like, alas, they didn't. But it's good that he finally managed to take without doing it. Just makes me wonder if how many times it took. If it took more than 15 and all that. But it is funny to watch the blooper reel and see them show all the different takes where they messed it up. Even the alternate angles where whatever got messed up is happening off of the camera. And here right now, trying to cover the affair, it makes you wonder how much Elizabeth actually suspects. Now, oh, here it comes right here. There it goes right there. See? Finally managed to take without it. Now, as for the character of Elizabeth, originally Cindy Williams was cast as Elizabeth, and this was after Madeleine Kahn was originally cast, and then she had to move because of a scheduling conflict. And of course, Williams stepped in, but then once Kahn's schedule cleared up, Brooks fired Williams and replaced her with Kahn again. And I think that's because he really wanted to have Kahn in there and work with her again, because he had just worked with her on Blazing Saddles, where she played Lily von Stupp, the off-key singer, which, considering that Madeleine Kahn was trained to sing, that is a hard thing to do, because you can do it, but when you are used to singing on-key in part of your training, getting your voice to go to sing off-key intentionally is hard. I mean, it's one thing if you struggle sometimes to sing on key for in certain parts of your range or shift from low to high and all that, but to sing off key intentionally for comedic effect, that's hard. And this right there he goes, he's escaping. This right here just shows he could have really gotten out of those chains easily. And this is probably a reference to Fritz's death. And we're going to see some of Elizabeth's singing pretty soon. Once it cuts back to the castle. Here we go, the angry mob. It's not going to be a Frankenstein movie, even a parody one without an angry mob. The assistant character. That was originally followed in the line that said "Storm the Castle." That was in one of the trailers. I can see why they cut it out. It works for the trailer, but it's not really important. It kind of hurts this flow a little bit. Right now they're mainly talking about finding the monster and all that, but he says that is like, are they already planning on storming the castle? I mean, that's what the line was. So it was like find and kill a monster, then storm the castle, take care of the doctor. Like the original, going in two different directions. There he is with Elizabeth, like, "You broke loose, what to do?" There we go, we finally got Madeleine Kahn with her hair down. She looks good in that costume. Oh, sorry if you guys heard anything when I knocked the mic over accidentally. Uh, right here. I do like that they did design Madeleine Kahn's costume to really resemble, at least here, the outfit that the fiance wore in the original film. Definitely does echo that. Of course, in a little bit, she's also going to be echoing the bride in a certain way, but I'll save that for once we get there. I also didn't comment on it earlier, but that line that Colin says about no tongues, that was an ad lib, and you can definitely tell with how. Oh, there it is right there. There it is right there. I forgot. That was definitely an ad lib. You can definitely tell with how Gene reacts. You can definitely tell he's even like holds his tongue back and like all. And there comes the monster coming back to the castle. Earlier it was like no on the lips. The Battle Hymn of the Republic. In the public domain, so they do not have to pay royalties for her to sing it. And there's the monster. Now I just love how this part's shot where at first you think like, oh no, is the monster gonna kill her? Because the monster does kill Elizabeth in both the novel and in certain adaptations. He menaces her in the original one. They're not gonna actually have him kill her. There it is, this scene. Straight out of other Universal ones, kind of looks like yeah, the Wolfman doesn't kidnap anyone like that, but the set kind of reminds you of some of the ones you'd see in there. But throw in like the Mummy or the monster in one of the movies walking off with a girl. And come back in. There she is. She has the white in her hair like the bride. She's like, oh, what's going on? What the heck happened? And there's the monster in some cave lair of his. And he's looking like, what's up, baby? I don't even think he knows what money is, Elizabeth. You're wasting your time. I just like how you could even tell what he wants just from the look, the way he's giving Elizabeth looks right there. Just the look at her face. Looks like Ingo was right. He does have an enormous swastika in the right here. I just love that. Then you combine it with the sound Peter's about to make. That adds to the comedy there. It's not super raunchy, but it's raunchy enough. Definitely a Brooks call there, but it works. I come in with the heart. There's post-coital smoke. There you are. Zipper neck. It fits. Yeah. But Karloff's monster wishes it was this easy with the bride, but nope. Uh, this is probably the best point to mention. For Peter, in addition, Payday, and, very memorable film role that he himself would reference years later on an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. And also the fact he's one of the few versions of the monster actually gets to talk, as we're about to find out. He met his future wife while making this film. Yep, Lorena Alterman visited the set while doing an article for the Rolling Stone, and she met him. And they were together from when they started dating until he passed away in late 06. They had 2 daughters together. So they had a pretty good run together and had a beautiful family, and Peter sadly passed away, which to mention is that he passed away right before my grandmother did, so kind of a little bit of irony there that the grandmother that essentially introduced me to Peter Boyle passed right after him. It makes you wonder here how long they've been playing that music. And here he comes. As he's gonna start climbing the wall. Like the music. It's like a moth to the flame following that music. I've already gone through all the trivia I had in the notes, and there's nothing else I remember from the thing. But it's kind of a shame that most of the Frankenstein movies always depict the monster as mute, because he's very articulate in the books. Give me the book. Would have been nice to throw some of it. Some of it is actually thrown in this last scene, so that's another nice reference I'm glad they throw in there. And the context is different, but it still does fit, and Peter does deliver it pretty well, as we're going to see. With this right here, him climbing, and then he's going to faint from the exertion. Of course, makes sense. I mean, this is post-coital exertion, so no wonder he passes out here. And of course, what he's planning is very dangerous, but when have the Frankensteins in any of the movies not tried dangerous stuff? I know the series was still ongoing when they made this, but the Peter Cushing Frankenstein did a whole bunch of stuff. He even transferred the soul, so for him there was nothing he would not do in the name of science. And you could tell from this whole thing right here, it's like, oh no, it's going to be something with spinal fluid, as he was talking about earlier. The one way to correct the cerebral spinal fluid. It's going to be a transference. And there they go, they got it going. There's a way. You get something to stop making noise, just hit it. It makes me wonder what would have happened if it had gone 14 minutes, 59 seconds, or 15 minutes, 1 second. And here come the villagers. They're storming the castle. And they show up at the wrong moment. Now my guess is they heard the music and they figured that's the way the monster's gonna go, so let's storm the castle. Or it could be they're like, screw the doctor, we will kill him now. I just love how they're, oh look, even one of the elders is there. I love that. I just love how they quickly found the staircase down. Makes me wonder if they knew which one it was going to be from a past encounter there. And there it went. Clock stopped. Now they're going to grab it. There you go. The monster's waking up like, what? There it comes. And he did it. And that monster's flexing his Mental muscle like a boss. And here it comes. And I think what it makes it also is that Frau Blooker sees it. Just look at her look on her face there. And this part right here, I believe is original, but it's carries on from that pretty well, and it suits this character. And the way he's saying it, the way Peter's acting this out right here, it really does make you feel for the monster and everything done and shown before. Like, there's a reason why the whole subtitle thing about the Frankenstein monster is he's just misunderstood. Part of that is, people judge him just for how he looks. I mean, he does have that criminal brain and he does do some things, but depending on what film and what moment you're talking about, some of it's accident. Like the Flower Girl in the original was an accident. Here, the only person he really killed was the guy who was taunting him. Everything else is like just them judging him based on the past monster's actions and his abnormal brain. And that is also a reference to Son of Frankenstein, because the same thing happens to that inspector. A fun thing is, in addition to seeing this on one of the movie channels when I was younger, I also saw it on A&E. Funny enough, back to back with the original Frankenstein, so that was a nice little double feature. Seeing the original and then what it was parodying. There's Victor and his bride. So he married Inga, and he stayed in Transylvania. Hold on to your hat. Uh, he knows what's about to happen. He knows what's about to happen. Some wedding night shenanigans. Now, with what he did, one of the first things that comes to mind is like, what lasting effects will it have? We saw the monster gain intelligence, but what things will happen with the doctor? And this is our first hint right here. I just like hearing the music. He's all like having something subconscious. I know in the deleted scene where he was talking with Verhoekstein, he kind of seemed to act a little different when he first heard it, which that was supposed to be a callback to. But he seems a little bit more visibly shaken up by it and like rubbing his head, like, what now? Like something in him is awakening. And right here we see that the monster, he's intelligent. He looks like he's reading the Wall Street Journal, so now makes you wonder, what is he going to do for a living now? Because we can tell from this, it looks like he's married Elizabeth. Look at Elizabeth's hair. Like the bride. Coming to bed. He likes it. He's like, mmm. Makes you wonder, what does he do for a living? Does he just live with his wife and all that? And the dad pays off stuff for dad get him a job and all that. Imagine the monster doing stuff. He'd probably kill it as a manual laborer, but I don't think that would be the type of job he would do. And there, another hint at what happened with the doctor here. He's acting a little bit like how the monster used to. A hint, I wonder? I like how the camera zooms in right here. Nice little foreshadowing, especially as it's about to go in his eyes. There's like the Up to Igor. Perfect way to end this. Him playing the horn, segueing into the musical score. I think that was supposed to be the gargoyle right there. Like, he kind of looks like he could be either of them. And then right there. All the actors, little girl. Apparently, originally Gene wasn't credited, but then Hackman, of course. But then in some of the re-releases, they credited him. I'm glad they did. I mean, even without it, you can tell. Screen story and screenplay by Wilder and Brooks. Produced Michael Gruskoff. And then, of course, directed by Mel Brooks. Credits short, sweet, and to the point, just like a lot of the classic Universal ones. And a nice little therein. Yeah, this has been a nice little commentary experience. Glad you guys shared it with me. Till next time, guys.